Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Simi Chowdhury, the Director of the Mayor's Office of New Americans for the City of Chicago. As a child of Pakistani immigrants, born and raised in Venezuela, I am particularly excited to be speaking on the theme of migration with renowned artist and activist Ai Weiwei. We have thousands of people joining us from across North America, and we thank you all for joining this lively conversation this afternoon with us. We also want to encourage each and every one of you, as you have just watched this inspiring film, to take action. As Ai Weiwei says in his book, no action is too small and no action is too late. And for those of you who are not aware, Ai Weiwei recently published a book, and this book is a great complement to the film that you just watched. For those of you who are interested in learning how you can find out ways to serve refugee populations in your city and across different parts of the country, please join us and visit the website www.therefugeecenter.org/human-flow. Now, let's start the discussion. If you could please take out your phones and open up a web browser to slido.com. Once you've done that, please enter our event code, Humanity. This is a platform where you will all be able to ask questions, and we can engage the audience that is joining us from across the country. Once you've done that, you are prompted to either submit a question or you can vote on a previously submitted question. We will also be polling our audience with a couple of trivia questions. Our first question: for the past decade, the majority of US refugees have come from this country. Let's see how you all did on this question. So, as 35% of you answered correctly, the majority of refugees are Burmese refugees who have come from Myanmar. We will be taking your polled questions throughout the course of this evening's discussion. Ai Weiwei, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we are very much grateful for you to speak with us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. And I think it's nice to join your discussion on refugee issues. So when we talk about refugee issues, actually we talk about humanity. It's not just about them, it's about us. You know, as we all understand, human rights, human dignity, is something we can never really separate. So I'm very happy to have a chance to join you and to answer questions.
Thank you once again. So again, we encourage you all to either vote on the questions or to submit your questions online. The first question we have is, what was the biggest obstacle you and or your team faced when filming Human Flow?
As you all watch the film really is quite, have to travel to many locations, 23 nations, among 40 of our biggest refugee camps in the world. And we also interviewed over 600 people, so we come out roughly in 900 hours of footage. In each locations, the situation are very different. The history, the reason to become a refugee, or how they're being treated are quite different. But the most difficult thing is when you make a film, you have to leave that location very fast to moving to another one, and you really had this doubt how much you can help the situation. So I think that's most difficult. Till today, I still feel, we doesn't matter what we do, we never can do enough to dealing with this kind of human crisis. 65 million people being forced out of their home, and this is the biggest humanity crisis ever on record. And when you watching this film, during that time could be thousands people already being forced out their home, and among them a lot of them, almost majority of them, are women and children.
Yeah, in fact, as we were speaking before we joined the stage and the audience, we were talking about how in this time, in this year alone, we've only taken 11 Syrian refugees, which is quite devastating considering, as you notably said in the film, that this is the first time since World War II that we've had this amount of refugees across the world. The next question we have here is, after watching the film, what is the biggest takeaway that you hope people would leave with?
I think people would share same kind of understanding as I do, to re-look at humanity. Those very basic values which made our life, made our society, which can be helpful or something worse to live with. And if we don't really defend those very basic values, and I think the sense can getting much worse. We know those kind of tragedies have so much to do with us. Even, we think it's happened far away. For example, the Iraq War is very much designed and structured by US and Britain and quite a few nations. It leaves a few million refugees, killed a few 100,000. I mean, this is obvious, all those wars always have our shadows or in there for whatever the reason. So if we don't really act upon those issues, and we become a part of it. So this is not asking for mercy, it's really responsibility. And it's kind of responsibility we all in there.
And similar to that question, our next question is, what do you suggest that we can do to help, aside from what you've shared with us about really humanizing and thinking about the humanity of people? What are perhaps some steps, some actionable items that we can do to help the crisis that we are grappling with?
I think we talk about refugee crisis is huge, but how it developed into this huge crisis, and all those tragic human-made tragics, and it only can be solved if we're really get involved. So, and also all those humanity or human rights are connected issues. So if we can help one person or one family or someone in our neighborhood, or it helps humanity, and it's all connected. So the consciousness and the willingness to act is most important. After we have this kind of knowledge.
Great, and we actually have a question here from James who asks you the following question. As you've worked to raise awareness of humanitarian issues across the world, what positive changes have you seen that you think can be traced back to your work?
That's a difficult question. I don't see, we made this film, and also in all my art practice, in museums or exhibitions, I always trying to do some projects in relating to my concern and my own refugee situation. And but to see as a result, I couldn't tell, I think it's important we see our effort as part of the result. and we have to do it. It's not our choice. We have to identify with certain values to make our life or to have some meaning. I think that is the result itself. I don't think it necessarily can immediately help the refugees. That takes a lot of effort, and to deal with situation already becomes so bad. Our politicians, as you just mentioned, U.S. only take 11 Syrian refugees since this administration. This is more than a joke. It's so sad and so shameful. As a nation, strongest nation in the world, have all the resource, selling weapons to Saudi, to all those dangerous areas, and not bear any responsibility. I mean, this is totally shameful.
Absolutely. Along your journey, were there refugees that you met that were aware of your art and your own status as a dissident? So I think the question that we're hearing here, there's, in fact, 57 people had asked this question or voted on this question was, were there people along your journey that knew about your art and your own relationship with your native country of China?
I don't think so. Not among the refugees. Among the so many camps we visit, maybe a few recognize me, but most of them, they're quite indifferent, and they are very ordinary people. They come from very foreign areas, speak different language, and poor people mostly. And yeah, but the people we visited as politicians or UNHCR people, some of them may know me.
And perhaps a follow-up question is, in your experience meeting refugees and as a child of refugees, were there particular stories or anecdotes that you could pull that felt familiar?
Well, I grew up in a society where my father was exiled the year I was born. So maybe that's how I got involved, why I care about situation like this. Because I care about people who, in this kind of desperate situation, their life are being changed because other people's, interests or. So I'm quite identified with those people in those kind of conditions, and make me as a very natural act to trying to understand them or to share their experience. I think that maybe give to answer the question of why I have to make this film.
And actually, the next question that we had was largely related to what was the impetus or the main drive towards making this film in the first place. And since you sort of spoke on that, I wanted to add to that, and perhaps this is just my ability as a moderator to take that opportunity. Something that I noticed in the film, and perhaps a lot of our audience members noticed as well, was that within the film you wove in a lot of, or at least a number of different poetry that was either inspired, from Persia. And as a fan of, Sufi poetry, I'm curious to know what led to that connection with the poetry and the cinematography that was portrayed in your film.
Well, I'm an artist, and I'm a son of a poet, and for me to understand the humanity, we have to really do a lot of research in literature, in history, what happened before, and about the Bible, about the Quran, about the Old Testimony. We try to get everything, literature or art, in relating to this topic, human flow. So as we all understand, as human, we all developed through this kind of struggle. I mean, from beginning of the human development. So that's why I think this is a very basic human rights to trying to survive from this kind of danger or difficulty or famine and all those conditions. So I think the poetry serves a great purpose when we look at humanity in different perspectives. It could be Persian poet, it could be Turkey poet, it could be poet from Asia. So I think it's very important to put our current struggle and the tragic moment into a historical perspective, to see humanity's continuity of effort in each generation and take every generation to defend it. And of course, about cinematography, people think we made the film quite beautiful in a certain sense, but I think even in the most suffering moment, there's a beauty, because as long as there's a humanity, there's a beauty. We always have to find the beauty in the nature and in contrast to human struggle.
Absolutely. I think that was very, very clearly portrayed in the moment where the women from Palestine were speaking about they feel largely like they've been forgotten, but they were still laughing along the way. And in fact, you started to laugh as well. And so in so much distress and in so much atrocity, there's still this sort of laughter. So we're actually going to take another poll. I believe most of you had participated in this as well. I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is going to be to this question, but the question is, should America take in more refugees? And let's see here. We have, the answer is overwhelmingly, 97% said, yes, we should. I think we're going to have a conversation with the no's. So thank you for those of you who participated in that poll. The next question we have is from Valentine. Valentine asks, as a man with a Chinese passport and a safe home in Berlin, how do you reconcile your international freedom and mobility with the trauma and injustice that you saw while filming Human Flow?
So what is the question?
So I think that it's a long question, but I think what the questioner is asking is, right now, you have the ability to go from, for example, for this experience or for this particular event, you're able to go from Berlin to Chicago and travel. And when you went to these different countries and your crew went to 23 different countries, you met with people who don't have that opportunity to travel in that way. They're lucky if they can even escape the places that they are native to. So what type of feelings does that emerge for you?
I think the refugee problem is not they're just being locked somewhere or they're being pushed against all those policies, all those media has tried to picture them as someone different. They are different from us, or they could be dangerous to our establishment. And those are not the most difficult thing. I think the difficult thing is even you accept them, their lifetime would be still extremely, almost impossible to be integrated with this society here, because all the values are different, and the language and the religion and the habit, and also they are being cut off from what they are familiar with. I mean, this is an unthinkable condition. So I think if we can really think we are one of them, and then you will understand that the situation is not just to be accepted, but how to survive. And we know all refugees, in average, each of the refugees will stay about 25 years as a refugee. That means their lifetime would have that status. And they mostly, even they come to Europe, they will stay in the camp for years, waiting for someone to tell them some possibility to get a job, or all smallest thing in the society, which is it makes them, I think many of them have to commit suicide, or they want to even go home to die in their own nation. Many of them said, we rather die. We never imagined the journey can be so difficult. They are brave people. They still have hope. They're like us. They want their children to escape. Many children even escaped without no adult attend, on those boats, because they only have that much money to pay the smuggler. And so, there has no difference from any of us. If you look at them, you all watch the film. They're not dangerous person. They're fine people, and with courage, and trying to just move away from those wars. So, what I'm going to say about it?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, in large part, the people that have been in the United States for a while, especially by way of coming, in the earlier 20th century, were considered at one point refugees, in large part coming from, countries that have predominantly, rather European countries. And so it's interesting now when we reconcile all the countries that you showed are what we would call developing countries, and they're being swallowed by European countries. So just this change, the shift in the tide is one that is very noteworthy. Our next question comes from Lydia, and she asks, was there footage that was not included in the final cut that you wanted to talk about, or perhaps that you wanted to portray in your film?
Well, we shoot roughly about 900 hours of footage. This 2 hours, what we have been putting there, we're trying to intentionally put our film as calm as possible, not to include footages which have violence or too sad or something like that. We're trying to give some moment to portray those people. And of course, there's a lot of footage is not there.
Okay. Our next question is from River, who asks, why did you decide to have shots of yourself filming at multiple points within the narrative? So in other words, I believe the question is, what role do you consider yourself playing within the film?
Well, when we start shooting, I never imagined I would put myself in there. It's only decided by later editor, and he feels very important. I am quite convinced by him because the film is not a clearly narrative story. I need some lines to keep people understand this is one person's journey. It's not necessarily even balanced view about refugee situation. The topic's much more complicated. So to put myself there, it shows 2 reasons. One, it is a film made by this person who knows nothing about refugee. It just jumped into on this boat and trying to record this piece of history. Second, it trying to encourage people. Anybody can do the same thing, to visit a refugee family or to get to know the situation. First time I got to know is because I have this curiosity. I cannot turn my face away when I see all those news and those images. So I brought my son to Lesbos, this little island. I said, let's have a vacation there. But in my mind is to see how they approach the shore and how they have been received by Europeans. And of course, what I have seen is shocking. And so we decided to make the film. I never really planned to make this film. It started all naturally.
And actually, on that note, the next question that we have speaks a little bit towards whether there was a particular country or city that you visited during your travels that was specifically impacting that left a particular mark on your heart after your experience?
I should say every location is devastating. You know, there's no location where it's better than others. And some locations you still can see they're not too far from their own land, so they still have a community. There have been 3 generations of refugees there. So they already have a little community. But the further they go, like the one ended up in Germany or some of locations, I think it's more difficult for them because it's just not easy. Yeah.
Well, so we have one final poll, and this is another sort of trivia question. Which of these celebrities was not a refugee? And actually, the correct answer is Lupita Nyong'o. So for those of you, for the 25% that we have, you were correct. Before we close out the event, Ai Weiwei, we want to ask you whether there's any final remarks or imparting words that you would like to share with us this evening.
I think this issue is not a refugee issue again. I think it's so much related to how we look at ourselves and what we want to do to not helping others, but to rebuild our trust in society and the trust in humanity. I think everybody can do something about it. So let's not give up. Let's try to make the society which can, help those people who is unfortunate, and to bring up those children, to still give them hope. So I think that's very, very important. And thank you for watching.
Thank you. So thank you once again. We sincerely appreciate the time that it took for you to come join us here in Chicago to speak on this incredibly worthy cause and help us challenge ourselves on how we are working towards restoring the humanity amongst the people that we interact with and the people that we ought to be interacting with. So finally, again, to all of those people who are joining us online, we want to remind you again that in a way to get involved, you can join the website. Please visit the website. In fact, there's 5 practical ways to get involved, much of which you heard from Ai Weiwei this evening. The website is the refugiecenter.org/human-flow. For all of the Chicagoans in the house and the people that joined us here locally, there are a number of organizations that are outside. You can sign up to volunteer and learn ways to serve refugees both in our city and our state. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate that you're able to be here, a part of this discussion, and we wish you a lovely evening.